been about 9 months since the motion media tax credit in the state of Missouri came on board. And since that time, we've had a tremendous amount of activity with films getting fully produced and finished and others just getting started. Lots of questions about how it all works and the importance of the role of the producer. Today, we're recording this episode live, actually, in our world headquarters here at Cape Sokol. And I have 3 guests who are going to teach a whole lot about this program. Stick around. Hi there. Welcome to the Screen Lawyer Podcast. I'm Pete Salsich, the Screen Lawyer. And today on the podcast episode, I'm very excited because we're going to do something a little bit different. We're not in our normal studio. We are actually in the Work Cafe seminar room here at Cape Sokol because I have 3 guests who are joining me today to talk about the Missouri Motion Media Film Tax Credit. Missouri Motion Media Tax Credit. It's one of those words that we just call it the tax credit in the world, but we know what it means, or we think we do, and we're going to learn more about all that. Let's get to my guests. Andrea Sporcic-Klund is the director of the Missouri Film Office. Andrea has been on the sort of boots on the ground driving this process from back when we had a tax credit in the past, through the 10 years in the wasteland, and then in the last year of all the excitement that's going on. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. Really appreciate it. And next to Andrea is Bryan Krueger. Bryan is a CPA and a partner at SFW Partners. And Bryan has the distinction of being, I don't know how many you've done, at least 2 so far already, but fully certified all the expenses for films for the tax credit.
Yeah, the first 2.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Welcome, Bryan. I'm looking forward to learning about that part of the process as well.
Yeah, thank you.
And then Jessica Ambuehl, a local, regional, worldwide, actually, when you hear from her, producer, director, and actor who produced the first short film to be accepted and fully go through the tax credit program, and can talk all about that from the role that many of you all know, which is that producer, the person putting it together. And we want to focus on that role throughout this conversation today. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks all of you guys for being here. I want to tee this up a little bit by saying one of the things that has become very clear to me in the last year or 2 as this has come on board is the importance of the role of the producer separate and apart from the other roles that many filmmakers have. Writer, director, producer, actor, all of those things. It's very common. But you can't just get some money, shoot some footage, get some more money, shoot some footage, and take advantage of this program, right? So, Jessica, let me start with you. You have been that multi-hyphenated person. You are. You have projects where you're doing all sorts of things. Tell us about how the role of the producer fits into this and how you got started or maybe how you took vision through the process.
It was a little bit of a last-minute idea because the tax incentive got into effect, was it October
16th. Yes.
October 16th. We knew that we were going to start filming Vision early December. So as we started in pre-pro, my co-producer said, "What do you think about doing the tax incentive?" And I was like, "Let's try." But there's so much pre-pro to do before you even consider doing that, because until you get that pre-approval letter, none of the expenses actually count. So we couldn't buy any of our wardrobe or props. Nothing could be spent until we could see if we could get approved. So there was a lot of thought process if it was beneficial to our film and if we could actually manage that timeline.
Well, and managing it, that's something I think is really important. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as sort of how much time you have to do this and how much time you have to do that in that process. But you said something there that I think was interesting, which wouldn't have occurred to me. And that's trying to decide if we even fit in this. Is this good for us? In other words, if we want to do this, it's going to impose some things on us. Can we do those? Is that sort of what you meant?
Yeah, because we all know in our industry, there's a lot of imposing things, right? There's a lot of work to get something from concept to screen.
Sure.
And so do you have the capability, do you have the time to fill out the forms, to wait for an approval? Do you have a good line producer? And just someone keeping track of all the receipts. Are they kept the right way? We learned some things through the process of being audited that we didn't know going into it.
Right.
And so do you have someone on your team that is willing to take care of that?
Well, that's a great question. Do we think that is a new team member, right? Or is that a skill that other team members just need to add to their toolkit? You know, I mean, is that, because I think of a line producer as someone, and I realize this was probably unfair to line producers because I'm going to limit it to what I think of, but someone who can read a script and say, that's 22 shoot days and that's this, you know, do that work to put a budget together. But there's more than that, right? You said you couldn't go do your wardrobe, but you still had to figure out how much that was going to cost in order to put it in your budget, to put it in the tax credit application, which meant you still had to go do the legwork at work and find it all out, right?
Yes, the tax incentive can be a thought, but it's not your first step. So you have to have a lot of things in line, which Andrea can talk about, to actually input into the form to tell them whether or not that we are a good fit. And so it doesn't negate all that, it just adds to it. I think if you have strong team members that know what they're doing, that have worked with the budgets and are good with details and don't mind the paperwork, then you're good. I don't necessarily think you have to have someone extra on it, but it is an extra thing for a producer to have to work with.
Interesting. Okay. So if it's not your sharpest skill set, you may want to find someone that is good at that, or just add it to your toolkit, right?
I would say you're speaking to someone who's very anal on the details, so I would say you need that person on any project, no matter the budget.
Right. Well, that's true.
So speaking from experience, I'd say you need that no matter what. But it is extra effort, and it might be worth the effort. And for us, for Vision, it was very much so.
So can you share what your budget on Vision was? Well, tell us about Vision, right? I said it right away without really talking about it.
I can't share the budget. I'd have to kill all of you if we did that.
I understand.
But I can tell you, Vision was unique because, you know, a client came to us and we wrote this script as to tell a nonprofit story. And they had said, we have the money. And then 2020 hit. And then we lost most of the money. But we still had, I can tell you, 10 grand. So we said, well, let's do a teaser so that when things come back into life, maybe that can be enough to raise the rest of the money that we needed in the first place. Right. So we had a one-day shoot, 10 grand, teaser. Fast forward several years, we now have all the money. There were a number of revisions along the way. I said, we've worked so long on this. I don't want to put too much effort in until I see the money in the bank. Right. But once the money hit, it was go time. And so it's a short film for a nonprofit called Love the Lou, and they work in North City. So we actually met some of the requirements as far as being in a Blythe area and things that come up in a tax incentive application. Right. But it was to bring positive light to what people are doing in the area, to help people see that they can make a difference. And they don't have to have special vision through these glasses that our main character finds. So, so we got funded. Thankfully, our lead is a very young face. So he had just graduated high school when we did the teaser. When I called him, he had just graduated college. Wow. He had a young face, so it worked. So we used all the footage, the 10 grand, which we...
Did he have to shave or something?
He did have to shave, yes. Yeah. But, you know, the 10 grand we spent years ago didn't apply to the tax incentive, but we knew what we needed to do because we put together our line budget for a several-day shoot to shoot the rest of it. And so we knew what that looked like, and then we kind of compensated, well, how much more would the tax incentive bring to the film to stretch it? You know, Can we give people higher day rates? Can we afford this? You know, it does come into your mindset of how you plan.
Yeah. And so in that thinking, in that thought process, you're thinking of the tax credit as a way to acquire additional funding at the budgetary stage, not something to sell later to pay back investors, but to add. So in that, you know, did you then find somebody to finance or loan against it, or that process to fill out the budget?
So co-producer Dan Paris with Speak Up Productions, he has someone that he knows. Yeah. I literally said, I don't know that world. There are brokers that you can hire to sell that tax incentive. So it's not, I think some people have the misnomer when they hear tax incentive. You don't get money right back. You don't get a check from the Missouri Film Office or the government saying, here's your $20,000, congratulations. Right. It's a tax incentive, and there's so much work to still sell that off to make that back. So you also have to plan for, okay, so we got approved for the tax incentive, we can spend these things now. Now we have, it was at 90 days after our last billed invoice, we had 90 days to be audited, we had to pay for that. And we learned some things through that too. And it all worked out beautifully. But, since we were kind of the guinea pig for being the short film and On Fire was the feature, it's actually an honor to be able to say that and to say, just the other day, I was like, Andrea, there's one thing that we noticed. Like our auditor emailed the co-producer and he emailed me and said, the Chipotle lunch, that receipt. I said, yeah, it's in the Google Drive. It's on the spreadsheet. Yeah, it is, but it doesn't say the exact address of where you ordered it from. Now, I'm anal, so I had 3 different versions of that receipt in my files. And the one that I uploaded into our shared folder for the CPA wasn't the right one, but I had another one that said it was off Chippewa in St. Louis because you could get it from Nebraska. So that would have cost a lot more to Uber that one over. So, things that you don't think of until you go through it. So that'll be helpful for people to go through it to know that every single receipt has to have a Missouri address on it.
I think that's so fascinating. Well, so when will we be able to see Vision?
So Vision premiered last weekend at the St. Louis Filmmakers Showcase. But then they can go online, social media, on a website, and then we have there's actually a speaking tour that's going on all across St. Louis.
Oh, that's fantastic.
To hopefully create conversations of people wanting to make a change.
Well, we will put some information about that in the show notes so people can check that out. That's exciting. Thank you for walking us through that. And I think obviously there are a number of things that you talked through that will lead to further details here. And Bryan, let me ask you, CPA, obviously you've been, if your partner, you've been practicing for a while, now all of a sudden this new thing starts coming in. How did you get involved, and how did you get involved with On Fire in particular?
Yeah, sure. So John O'Leary, who's the movie who it's about, is actually a current client of mine. I do his tax work, and he'd be fine if I shared that with you. And one of his advisors came to me and said, hey, do you know anybody that can do an audit of a tax credit? I said, well, let me look at it. Maybe we can. And so that's initially how I got introduced to the idea. So once we looked at the requirements, the audit requirements, and ran through the packet that the state puts together on the audit requirements, we said we certainly can do this. Now, I will say in November of 2023, I didn't even know what a loan out was. So that's how new it was to us and to our firm. But, in going through the process, we have learned a lot, and it is a lot. And it's 100% audit, so we dig into every single receipt, invoice, everything. And so it can be kind of an arduous process if you don't have good record keeping and you're not organized and you don't have the proper systems in place to do that.
And maybe you should mention too, there are 2 different audits. So for our film, we had to pay to audit ourselves, and then we send all of that paperwork and forms to the Missouri Film Office, who has Bryan audited as well. So it's a 2-step.
Got it. Okay.
Just a spot audit. Yeah.
So yeah, you're got it. So, and I guess one of the questions that leads me to is, again, and that you're talking about that early stage when you're putting this project together. Is it helpful to consult with a CPA maybe early and say, what are you going to need from us to make sure that we can maximize this? So what form would you like? Do you have an upload? Is there a process that somebody hasn't done this before would be able to take advantage of? Sounds like an important conversation to have early.
Yes. And how much does it cost?
Well, yeah,
because then you can put that into your line budget. If they're in Missouri, then it counts towards your tax credit.
Yes, they're very important. And legal expenses too, folks. Hire a Missouri lawyer to do your entertainment legal, because it is actually a line item in the budget, and your Missouri accountant, right? Because those are qualified expenses. Well, that's so okay. So Bryan, then you got all these research. How long does it take, or how long did your process take for a film like On Fire?
So we were auditing as the production was going on. So I think, kind of going back to your point on when to engage the accountant, I think the earlier the better, so that you can have that conversation on how are you accumulating the information, how are you going to get it to us, how are we going to be able to access it. To use On Fire, for example, they use Green Slate, not promoting Green Slate, but that's a common accounting software in the entertainment industry. And so we were able to get view-only access and view all of the individual expenses, pull up the receipt, and it was very easy for us to navigate. And understanding that on the front end for both the producers, the production accountant, and for us to get on the same page, I think is critical to make it efficient.
That makes a lot of sense. You just used a term there that I think is worth unpacking a little bit, the production accountant. So that's a different role than your role as the auditor, correct?
Yeah, the production accountant is primarily who we work with. And maybe on a smaller production, that is also someone who does 10 different other things. Sure. But on some films, that is just a production accountant, right. And that's who we work with to get the information for the audit through them.
And then in the role of the production accountant on set or on a production is just that person who gets all the receipts, makes sure everything's documented, that sort of thing, correct?
Yeah, it's a producer, a line producer.
Yeah.
Depends what size
right.
project it could be, yes.
Okay, well, and I think that's important. For me, it's helpful to understand. We get questions a lot from clients who are sometimes very talented and have done lots of work, but this process is new, right? And it's new for us too. So understanding those little nuances is great. And I also want to, I'm a little more comfortable than I used to be about using terms like line producer at a cocktail party. I know what it means. Do people go to cocktail parties anymore? I don't know if that's a thing. But that's great. Well, thank you. Andrea, you're sort of hearing this from the point of view of, Jessica, the producer, and Bryan, the CPA, but from your perspective, where, I've heard you say this to people, and I've heard lots of people say that they've had this experience. If you don't know, if you have questions, they can call your office, right?
Correct, yes. And we have all the guidelines and everything is on our website, mofilm.org, under tax incentives, the motion media production tax credit. So, and the guidelines really do walk you through the whole process. There's a flow chart, there's pictures. It's kind of dry, but we're going to have a video, an animated video soon. So, a little sneak peek.
Did you get the tax credit for producing the animated video?
We did not apply. We did not spend the minimum, no. But a lot of the questions are the same questions. And we try to give you as much, and you can send in your application materials, and before you get it notarized, it all has to be notarized. This is state government. It's a bureaucracy. This is taxpayer dollars, so we are entrusted to these funds, and it behooves us to make sure that they're following the rules. So ask all the questions so that you guys do it right.
I think that's a good reminder that this is, and I like what you said earlier, Jessica, about the fact that this isn't a check. It is something that is set up to, if you follow these rules and you spend this money in the state and you hire Missouri companies and Missouri residents and so forth, and you get it audited correctly and you've got all your receipts, then the state will issue a tax credit. And can you just tell us a little bit, talk about this a lot, but kind of remind people what that tax credit actually is in terms of, it goes to the Missouri company that is the production company for
whoever applies, the company that applies for it. It'll be in their name, but they're completely transferable. So there's a form, and you can break it up and sell it however you want.
So you can sell someone's this much to this person, this much to that.
Right. So if you don't have a tax liability personally, if the production company doesn't, and their investors don't have a tax liability, it could be that's what you give your investors as their payback for their investment, or you can sell them via banks or brokers.
Got it. And then so if you if you sell it to a bank or broker or somebody like that, if it's somebody who will have a Missouri tax liability over the next 5 or 10 years, so they can use it in so many periods.
Yep. 5 years forward. Yes.
Got it. Okay, and I think that's an important reminder. And so let me a question that we get asked a lot is a timing question. So how quickly? Let's assume you've got somebody that's got their financing in place, got everything pretty much ready, and they're ready to submit that letter, that application. How quickly does the approval process happen from your office?
Okay. So it's important that you are pretty locked into your first day of principal photography. So that's going to tell us when, and we give you a 15-day wiggle room, but if it's beyond that, then it's revoked and you have to reapply. So, because we don't want to have a production hold up a bunch of tax credits that we could have another project, so that's just how it has to work.
So can you walk me back through that just so I make sure I'm understanding this timeline? So, among the things you fill out in the application form, one of the things is what is your anticipated date of principal photography? If I think that's going to be 45 days out now, can I still put my application in now?
As long as you can stay within 15 days of that date, as long as you're pretty tight on that. And then and she did mention, so the approval letter, so you apply, everything's in, check all the boxes, we have everything, we tell you that it's received, we have 10 days to approve it. And we've done it in less days, we've had to extend it like twice, I think, just because of the holidays. But so we say in 10 days, you will have a decision letter. And then your decision letter, the date of the decision letter is the date that you can start spending money. Doesn't mean you can't accrue bills. You could accrue bills previous, but you can't pay anybody until that date for it to count.
And that's a really important thing, because I think a lot of people are trying to understand, I've got to get a commitment that I'm going to pay this and I'm going to pay that, and they've sent me all this, I know what it's going to be. Can they send me an invoice or a deposit form or things like that? As long as is it all triggered by when I pay?
Mm-hmm, when you pay. So on the check, or when you pay. Yeah.
And so when you engage with somebody that's going to, let's say you sign up your craft service or whatever the different things, and they commit, okay, we will be there these days. We have all this. This is going to be the cost. They may want a deposit or something like that to guarantee. If I've got the commitment but I haven't paid yet, then I can pay once I get the letter. Okay. But if I have to pay a deposit, if I have to pay them a deposit now before the letter, that deposit's not going to count.
Right.
Okay. So that's really important to know. And one of the things you've said before is that in order to get approval letter, one of the things you have to do is you have to know your financing's in place, at least up to the amount that you're going to ask for the credit.
Correct. So your qualified Missouri spend, we'll talk about what that means in a minute. You have to show proof of financing that you have that much money in the bank to go through production.
So it has to be in the bank? Are you showing like a bank statement?
An investor letter would work, a bank statement, all kinds of different things.
Some kind of an actual binding commitment.
Correct.
So if I've got a client and they've got a commitment from an investor and they've got the signed subscription agreement or whatever, and now we know that this is, and there could be, because conceivably in that context, there could be some triggering events that, if you don't do this, I'm not sending you the money, but if you do, but I'm committed, and then you do this, then the money comes in. Would that be sufficient to show?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, like a term sheet. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
But you really do need proof of financing, not just saying yes. Okay. And I think you made a really good point for why that is, because we have a cap. We have so much each year that we can do, and you can't give people approval letters if they don't, and they're running around chasing money because someone else is ready to go won't get there.
Correct.
Okay. How are we in mid-July with our cap this year?
Yes. So of the bucket, we have $8 million for film, and we have $3 million left currently. And then we have $8 million for episodic. We currently have $6 million available. And it will re-up again in January. So we're hopeful that we will continue to see projects come in. We've got about 20 projects have applied or are applying for the incentive at the moment.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense of how that compares to other states in terms of volume when they're first getting launched? I'm just curious, because one of the questions that comes up a lot is, well, is this really doing it? Does it really do much?
Yeah, everyone wants these numbers that we don't have yet. We've only done one incentive. So basically our office, every time we issue it, so that's the very end, we issue it. Once it's issued, we'll do a press release with all the numbers. So On Fire did have that press release, that went out. Visions will come out next week probably, and then as it goes, yeah.
Right. And so, okay, that's and I know we're all watching this, right? I mean, that's part of the excitement here, and I think a lot of us are trying to figure out how to participate to help it grow. So you talked about the Missouri qualifying expenses, and any one of you, how do we track that as a, when you're putting together, maybe Jessica, to start with you, I'm putting this project together. I'm the producer, and you talked about all the different factors. One of the things I think you mentioned earlier, where we were talking before we started, is that you have an Illinois address, but if you're engaged by a loan-out company or a payroll company that's based in Missouri, your services can count. Is that right?
Yeah, that was one thing that we were talking through to try to figure out how to work out.
Right.
Me, little old me that comes from right over the river. So,
right.
And I was a big part of the film. So it's a nice, those are important things to think about is, we want to hire as many people here as possible.
Right.
But when you can't, even if you're 15 minutes away from the arch,
right.
How does that still apply? So we learned that, our payroll service was in Missouri. So as long as I went through payroll, we were good. Some of our crew were 1099s, but they lived in Missouri, so that was okay.
Okay.
Our production insurance company was not in Missouri. That's a large budget line item in an independent film.
Yeah.
They weren't in Missouri, so that didn't count. So, and then we had a couple, there was just some small little ones too. If you buy something on Amazon, might come quick, but that's not going to count. There's
right.
those little things. You have to kind of balance and try to, as producers, our job is to balance and to pre-plan as much as possible.
Right.
Put out the fires, anticipate what's coming, so that when they do come on set, it's less worrisome and you can tackle it with grace.
Right.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And it's all those little things. I mean, Andrea, when we were here last November right after the tax credit came out in a similar kind of presentation. And I remember somebody using the example, and I want to make sure I'm right, because I've said this to others, so I hope I was right. It's like you gave the example, like if you have some travel and you go on Southwest.com and buy a bunch of plane tickets, it's not going to count. But if you hire a Missouri-based travel agent, they can go on Southwest.com and book everything, send you an invoice for all of it, and you get an invoice from travel agent Missouri, it all counts. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, there's wages and compensation, which you've talked about. You can be right now, we have lost a lot of crew in the last 10 years. So the percentage that you applies to everything. So whatever percentage you get applies to everything. And wages, as long as you're paying Missouri withholding, that is the only thing that has to happen, then all of your wages and compensation packages count. All of that counts. And then vendors, if it's a Missouri vendor with a Missouri address, it counts. That's pretty simple. I know it gets real complicated, but those are simple things.
And I think that's important to remind people, because it can seem complicated. And Bryan, that world is, to many of us, is very complicated to do it right. But there are a few simple things to remember, and I think, Andrea, you just said that very well. And I've heard you say this before. The goal isn't to trick you up. The goal isn't to try to, no, we're not giving you that much. The goal is to hire people in Missouri, right? And so we want you to do it right, so there's more money spent here, so we can all go back to our state legislators and tell them how great this program is, and we need to keep it and grow it and improve it and do things like that. Well, that's great. I appreciate all of you, first of all, coming here and taking the time to join us here. This conversation could go on and will and continue, but a couple of key things I want to sort of take away as we wind things up here on this episode is, Andrea, remind people website, how to find information.
mofilm.org under tax incentives, motion media. Everything. It'll take you to the guidelines. All the answers are in the guidelines.
And Bryan, I'm sure you're ready to give out your cell phone number so lots of aspiring filmmakers can call you up and not be able to afford you, but want you to give a lot of free time. Is that right?
No, not really.
But how can, is there a community, do you know, of CPAs who are focusing in on this? It seems to me that that's something that...
So I'll jump in here. The tax credit, the film tax credit is new, but we have 62 tax credit programs in the state that all work the same. So anybody that has worked on any of those, so that's what I did first, was reach out to accountants that have worked on previous tax credits, and then We reached out through the Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants for the Arts. And so I have a small list, there's like 3 people on it right now that have said that they're willing to take these clients. So Bryan has been very busy. He's one of them, so.
Well, and that's great, and that's a reminder of the resource for our audience. Many of you probably already know this, but anybody listening, Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants of the Arts is a great organization to help learn about, and we all volunteer here on the legal side with VLAA, but that's of course accountants. It makes a lot of sense, right? That's great. Well, thank you. And then Jessica, we talked about vision. Anything else we should be watching for that you can tease us about, or do you have to be on camera somewhere tomorrow? What's next for you?
I have a production meeting in Chattanooga that I'm heading to tomorrow. I actually just got cast in a commercial in St. Louis next week.
Oh, all right.
And then we have pre-production for a true crime docuseries the next week. Then I head to Africa a couple months later.
That's awesome. We need to come back. Will you come back and a guest and just talk about Africa? Because I've heard some of these stories, and it's such a cool project that you do. So I would love to talk to you more about that. All right, last question for each of you. I do this all the time on the podcast. Andrea, what's on your screen? And that could mean anything. Like that could be the screen you have in your pocket. That could be the screen on your wall.
So not necessarily what I'm watching.
It could be. When someone says what's on your screen, what screen
My
comes
computer
to
screen,
mind?
unfortunately,
Okay.
and I'm looking at tax credit applications, of course. That's what's always on my screen.
Maybe too easy of an answer for you.
Palm Royale, I just finished watching that. That was a good job, yeah. I'm a fan.
We're 2 episodes in.
Oh, yeah, stick with it. It's
Okay,
good.
good.
Yeah.
All right. I'm always looking for that kind of. I usually ask this question to find out what I should watch. So that's good. All right, Bryan, what's on your screen?
We just came back from Cancun for vacation, and on the plane ride back, I watched A Beautiful Mind. I love that movie. I've watched it several times. I love it.
That's awesome. That got a whole, I don't know if it heard on the audience, but the whole audience went, oh yeah, okay. That's pretty cool. Jessica, what's on your screen?
Last night I got caught up with The Dragon Show. What's it called? Game of Thrones, The Dragon, the prequel.
House of Dragons.
House of Dragons.
All right. I'm
Didn't even
one
know the
episode
name.
behind, so don't tell me if
I won't
anybody
tell
killed
you.
anybody important.
There's always someone who dies.
I know. So Emmett Williams, who introduced us when we got started here, who's our host at Cinema St. Louis tonight, he was my guest last week, and we talked about that show, and he said, it's okay, but I just keep watching to see who dies. So I think that was pretty cool. Yeah, no, exactly. All right. Well, that's great. All of you, thank you. Thank you for this. Appreciate it. And folks in the audience here, folks who will see this or hear this, if you like this content, please, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. I'm supposed to go like this. It'll be on screen, or an arrow will poach up. We'd love to hear your comments. If you listen to audio podcasts, wherever your audio podcasts are, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get them, you can find us there. And if you're looking for any other information about any of the work we do, you can find us at thescreenlawyer.com. Thanks a lot, everybody, and thank you guys for coming tonight. All right.